Good morning, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Financial Freedom Podcast 2026, first episodes. And today I have Shane Adler coming out from Florida, and she's going to talk to the audience all about unlocking sales with strategic compliance, frameworks, and certifications. She is CEO of Edos Data Consulting, and it's going to be an interesting conversation around strategic compliance, strategic thinking, and I'm really happy to have her on. Shane, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And briefly introduce yourself and your background and what you do at Edos Data Consulting.
I came into entrepreneurship by accident. My background was in law originally, but I went straight from law school to nonprofit operations, which had a healthy dose of compliance alongside it at the time. Just in the world when it was happening, that was what was at the forefront. After a hiatus at wanting to get back into the workforce, I went back and got my MBA with a concentration in technology and operations. And I ended up going back at the same time as my co founder and husband, who did his dissertation on GDPR, which is the Global Data Privacy Regulation, and how startups were coping with the lift of complying with GDPR. And we looked at it, and together we were saying there's not really a good option. A lot of them were doing nothing because it seemed like either a tomorrow problem, like when they're bigger, or it was just too expensive for them to actually do what they needed to be doing. And so we founded Atos with the idea of offering fractional trust officer services, focusing on data privacy, AI governance, cybersecurity around frameworks, so that companies could access the level of services they need at the scale that made sense for their business strategy.
And the next question I have for you is, most of your clients, are they corporations or what are they seeking when they work with you?
We primarily work with startups and SMBs because a corporation, at least when you say that, it comes a big company comes to mind. They have the resources to hire a full-time compliance officer. Some corporations and bigger companies, they have entire compliance departments that just sit there and answer procurement questionnaires and things like that. But a startup with a four-person founding team doesn't have the bandwidth to do that and operate their core business. So we really focus on supporting them.
What is the number one question? For example, startups, a lot of people are starting companies and businesses this year. What is the number one question or point of confusion that they come to you for? Is it like strategic compliance? Is it privacy? How should they be thinking about these issues in a startup?
I think those are actually two different questions, or two separate questions. One of the things, not one of the thing that really brings people to us is because something's happened. They either are in danger of losing investor funding because they don't have things buttoned up, or a customer is requiring that they have a certification in place. These are things that happen on a day-to-day basis, especially B2B companies. If you're operating a B2B company, you're going to be spending a lot of time scrambling and doing questionnaires and procurement and all the security. I think I saw that there was a study recently where the more complex questionnaires from bigger companies can take up to 30 hours of full-time employee time to answer. And so that tends to be why people come to us. However, I would say we really subscribe to the principles by design concept when it comes to compliance. So baking in your operations around building trust, around data privacy management, all of that from the ground up. Like we work with companies who are pre-revenue, pre-product even, and getting that in place when you're building the workflow, when you're building your AI model, it is really critical because the consequences of compliance debt can be massive. That's our term for if you don't invest in compliance up front, like technical debt. It's always harder to go reverse engineer it, and sometimes it's impossible. One of the other motivations for founding Atos was being on the acquisition side of an M&A deal. There was a company that had built an AI SaaS product, but they had not handled the data appropriately on the front end. They were not using it in line with what is expected. And as a result, they were subject to a consequence called algorithmic disgorgement, which meant they had to delete their entire product. Like it was gone. And so that deal went from low 8 figures, like not a huge deal in the scheme of business world, material to founders, down to the value of their debt, mid 6 figures. And there's nothing you can do at that point, because if you're selling a house and they discover mold, you can't just go and find another buyer and not tell them about it. And these were not bad people. Like they just didn't know what they didn't know. So education is a big thing we try to do to make sure people don't fall into that trap.
Yeah. Yeah, it was great to hear your take on biggest mistakes founders make with compliance. For an early stage startup, what does strategic compliance look like versus do everything perfectly?
Well, for an early stage startup, it means looking at where the highest ROI is going to be. If you are building a health tech company, it's going to be structuring everything around handling personal health information appropriately, so that when it comes time to sign a business associate agreement under, like, for HIPAA compliance, you're set up. You're not scrambling and again dealing with the tech debt or compliance debt. It's looking at whether it's also looking at whether investing in, say, SOC 2 audits at an early stage even makes sense. Because for some companies, it's going to be something that maybe you align to, but you're not going to send low 5 figures towards an auditor to actually do the thing if you don't need it. We want to make sure that these companies aren't overextending themselves, because even those big corporations, even like an Amazon or a Walmart, they can't comply perfectly. Nobody can if you're going to actually make business decisions on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's one of the big secrets that no one wants to talk about. So it comes down to what I like to call a defensible narrative. Doing everything in a way that shows you're on the right track, so that if a regulator does start sniffing around for whatever reason, you can say, hey, we're like, our heart's in the right place. And then it becomes a get well plan instead of a headline.
Yeah, because I know a lot of my colleagues and friends, they were startup founders during the Gensler era, and they were telling me stories. Gary Gensler was just he was basically just out to get them. What is privacy in the era of privacy? Because you mentioned HIPAA. What is privacy principles by design?
That is our proprietary framework and philosophy around how we handle this. It's born out of that same dissertation where the research came out of that helped us figure out our concept for Atos. But it comes down to the fact that the regulatory landscape is evolving so quickly. We send out a newsletter every week with what's happening in our sphere, just in our like little subset of compliance. And it's a lot, it's overwhelming. And so we looked at what all of these things have in common. And it's also why we align to frameworks and certifications instead of trying to be a law firm and cover all the laws, because it's not only patchwork, it's a moving target patchwork, which just sounds like a mixed metaphor mess. But there are these principles that underpin all of the data privacy regulations, all of the AI regulations. And it comes down to things like only retaining data for a certain amount of time, only collecting data for a limited purpose, and then actually only using it for that purpose. There's some headlines recently about that. maintaining its accuracy, anonymizing or pseudonymizing where you can. All of these basic principles that when you bake it into the culture of your organization, your SOPs, your procedures, how you run things on a day-to-day basis, it turns into just how you operate as opposed to an audit scramble once a year.
Interesting. You mentioned AI in the last response. What are the biggest AI issues on the horizon for businesses?
I think the one that I think is a major issue that doesn't get talked about enough is shadow AI. Sounds like a really cool ninja or something, but it's the idea that even if you haven't deployed AI tools or aren't an AI deployer in your business, your team is definitely using AI. It's there. Like you have to know that they're putting emails into Gemini or ChatGPT for proofreading, or it's helping with the research, but it's unsanctioned and it's unmanaged. And going back to the idea that a lot of people don't know what they don't know, there's so many people out there who don't know they need to turn off the toggle that says that the model's going to train on their data. So if they're pasting in correspondence from a client, for example, to get a response generated, that's potentially personal information going in there or confidential information that is then training a model. So you need to actually be realistic about the fact that it is already in use, but do a look at where the demand is within your organization and then actually deploy those tools in a way that is managed, safe, centrally controlled, that sort of thing with guardrails.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another question I have for you is for those starting a company or starting a business, they want to be compliant. Was it easier to follow rules and regulations pre-Trump, or is it harder to be compliant in the Trump era?
Yes, I think that people are waiting with their breath held about AI regulation among the states a little bit, but it honestly it doesn't matter as much because I think what it is going to come down to is the fact that all AI is based on data, and there are data privacy regulations in I think more than half the states now, and some of them are very wide, like really broadly reaching, and so it's it doesn't even matter if the AI itself is regulated because how you're managing the data through the AI is already being regulated. I have this image I like where there's like a little house that's AI and its foundation is data. So it's going to be a moving target, I think. I think it's very exciting to think about AI. It's a very like sexy topic these days. But number one, the EU already has the AI Act rolling out. And number two, we've got all of these related things we have to worry about already.
Very interesting conversation. And talk about to close it out, talk about your journey for as a neurodivergent founder and strategic thinker. And for those starting a business, building a business that fits your brain, what would be your advice to them?
Honestly, I mentioned at the beginning that striking out and engaging in entrepreneurship at all had never been part of my plan. I thought I was very comfortable with a big company and a lot of structure, but being able to be nimble and work at a flow that works for my brain, like when I'm hyper focused on something and I have a great idea and I just want to dive deep and execute it all at once. As a founder, I'm able to do that. I can just get my idea out. And yes, I have partners I work with and I'm responsible to them and have obligations to clients, but it's allowed me to actually take advantage of the fact that I can see things in a different way. I don't have to get the same type of buy-in. I do. The buy-in I get is from people who understand me because we all got into this together. But it's not like I have to engage in change management to execute on an idea I have or to propose something that may seem out of the box because I'm seeing things in a different way.
How can people connect with you and check out your work and work with you?
We are at aetos-data.com. So that's aetos-data.com. And I'm just Shane at aetos-data.com. So you can email me directly anytime.
Excellent. And again, thanks so much for an interesting conversation, and keep up the great work.
Thank you so much. That's been wonderful.